Hi guys, welcome back. This is Carolyn. In today's video, we'll be painting something pretty interesting, which I am excited about. So this is a sketch that I have done in preparation for today's tutorial. And we will be painting a sunset scenery of this sailboat here with this lovely blue-orange sea and this also blue-orange skies. So let's get started. In terms of materials, let's go with the paints first. And when looking at the skies here, we have blue, a bit of yellow and orange. And the paints that I'll be using for blue here is Indanthrene Blue from Winsor & Newton. And then for the orange, we'll be using Cadmium Yellow Orange. Basically a very pigmented bright orange. And for the yellow from the sun, this here I've chosen to use Naples Yellow from Winsor & Newton as well. So these three colors will be the same for the waters. And then here we have the silhouette of the boat. We will be using yellow ochre, which is a very light brown, and then with burnt umber and sepia. So I'll be playing around with these three colors when it comes to painting this silhouette of the boat here. And finally, I'll be adding in neutral tint. This is to help increase the darkness in the pigments. For example, painting the darker areas here, I'll be adding in a bit of neutral tint into sepia to get this color here. And then this one is just a mixture of sepia and just a tiny bit of neutral tint. So these are the paints that we'll be using. And on top of that, you can see here that I've preserved these white parts, paper white, so we'll be using masking fluid for the area. And in terms of brushes, first we have this goat's hair brush, mainly for the background colors. And then I've chosen 3 different sizes of brushes. This one is a mix of natural hair and synthetic hair, so it absorbs more water. And I'll be using them in size 6, 8, and 10. And on top of that, here I have a synthetic brush with me. This is size 8. I think it's almost size 6 or size 8. Either one that will do. So this is a synthetic brush together with this angled brush. This is also synthetic. So if you do not have an angled brush, you may feel free to use a smaller size of a round synthetic brush like a size 6 or a size 4. The reason being is that the size of the paper that I'm working today is A5 size, so I have a very small area, which is why I've chosen the smaller size brushes, and these will be used to paint the ripples here. And I will talk more about this later. And finally, we have our paper here. This is 300 GSM, 100% cotton, cold pressed paper, and I have it taped down on my board here. So let's get on into the sketch. And here I'd like to show you the reference photo which I have taken from Unsplash. I will put the link down in the description below, so feel free to download it. And this is the full picture, but we will just focus on the subject here. And here I will go for half sky and half waters. So I'll start off with drawing out the horizon. And then we have the boat sitting right below the horizon here. And then we have the reflection below and a silhouette of two people sitting on the boat. And then we will have the sun shining through here, but I will not paint that out. And then we have some trees in the background, and I'll leave that out as well, and we just paint that in. So that's all for the pencil sketch, a very simple one. And then taking the masking fluid, so we can see that the sun is here and it comes out a little overlapping this part here, and we have it here and overlapping a little bit of the boat coming down. So I'll be putting masking fluid along these areas. So you can see that I've overlapped a little bit here and then here. Okay, and then now while we let it dry, I am going to show you a few practice that you can do before we start painting. So grab any rough extra paper sheet that you have, and then I'm going to lay out the first layer here with a very diluted wash. And when creating ripples, here I take this synthetic brush. So we need synthetic brush for this one because it absorbs less water, and using the dry brush technique, you paint out the ripples like this. And then you can choose to darken the center a little bit more. Now you may observe and see that there are blooms happening here. That's because my brush has too much water, is not dry enough. And when that happens, just grab a clean dry brush and then lift it up like so. So the reason why I'm using this synthetic brush is because if we use this brush, it has a mix of natural hair, it tends to absorb more water, and it is easier to get blooms with this brush. But you can see that this layer is already dry, so you can see this one, it blooms out even more as compared to the synthetic brush. It doesn't spread out so much. And then if mistakes like this happen, again with clean dry brush, using the lifting technique, pick up the pigments like so. So this can only be done when the layer is still wet. It's harder to pick up the pigments when it's dry. So feel free to practice as many times as you like before moving on. Make sure it's dry brush and then paint it on like so. And then here is my other synthetic brush. And then if it spreads, using the lifting technique, lift it up. My synthetic brush doesn't lift out nicely, so I'll use this brush instead. Alright, so feel free to practice as many times as you need until you feel comfortable. So this layer has already dried, and I'll start by using my head brush and then just wet the entire area on top. Okay, and then here I'm grabbing size 8 brush. Let's start off with Indanthrene Blue. And I'm going to paint from the top. So I like to have darker colors on top. And then washing off the colors with clean water. And just spread it out. So here I'm preparing for the transition to orange. Now let's grab orange. Sorry, before that, let's do yellow. So I'm going to paint it around the sun. Going into orange. So I'm getting a bit of muddy colors here. Make sure you use clean water. And then I'll lift my board up and let the paints flow downwards. And then with clean brush again, try to separate the colors between the blue and orange. And then feel free to tilt it in any direction to let them flow. And then using my head goat's hair brush, I'm going to flatten it out a little bit, like so. And then using a clean brush, I'm going to soften the edges on the side. And then right now I'm going in with a bit of brown, So I'm mixing burnt umber with a tiny bit of sepia. And then let's go in and fill in some background. So I'll keep this a little bit slanted. And then keep this clean. So it seeps into this area, not to worry, just use a clean brush and lift out the pigments like so. And then let's continue to bring the colors down. And I'm using this Hake brush. Let's continue to bring it downwards. Alright, so now I will keep tilting my board around and let the paints flow in different directions. Some will be letting the brown to flow upwards a little bit to look like trees, and then you can bring it, tilt it upwards to let the waters flow downwards. So now it's pretty wet. I'm going to wait for like a few more seconds before we paint in the ripples. So while I get ready, let's start off with this brush here. And let's get some blue. And as well as this one here, my bigger round synthetic brush. So it is still moist. So you can see almost dry brush and lots of pigment. And let's go in and paint the ripples. So the ripples will start off big in the center, towards the bottom area. And then as it moves further back, it becomes smaller. And then I'm adding more pigments to darken the center of the ripples. And then switching over to this one here with smaller brush strokes. So you can see there are some blooms happening. So I grab my size 6 brush and then lift off the pigments Make sure that your brush is clean. And if you think your ripples is too big, you can make it smaller. Okay, and now the paper is starting to dry up, and it's good to not touch it and let it do its own thing from this point onwards. And I'm going to leave it for a few more seconds until the pins settle, and then I'll dry it with a hairdryer. Alright, so now all that's left to do is to paint in that silhouette. And let's start off with the boat. I'm going to mix in neutral tint and sepia. And then as we get closer to the light, I'm going to add in a bit more brown and then orange. And then back to brown. And dark brown. But this area here will still remain lighter as the darkest brown on the left, because here it's still closer to the light. And then let's do the same for this two-person here, using the same color of neutral tint and sepia. He's wearing a cap. And I also add a bit of orange into this second guy over here. So I'll start off with the darker color and then bringing in some browns and orange. And then let's draw in the lines. And I'm mixing in a little bit of brown to give a variety in the shade. And let's paint in this area here. So I'm taking yellow ochre and paint over and leave a white line here to separate between these two objects. And then again playing around with the other browns. And if you look at the reference photo, there's a bit of sun ray shining through. Taking my size 6 brush, or take any smallest brush that you have, rinse off and pat it dry. Make sure it's clean and dry. And then we'll use the lifting technique to lift up like this here. Like that, and then the same here. So this is right on top of the masking fluid. So just lifting out a bit of the pigments here and creating a little bit of that glow. Okay, and then going back to size 6 brush, let's finish off this area here. And right now for the next step, let's create some shadows along here. So grabbing my biggest brush here, I have size 10 with clean water, and then just gently wet this area here. And then here I'm not wetting the whole area, but only like lines to leave some dry areas. And then let's use a very light brown, similar to this color here, but with more water. And then let's paint this in the shadow. You can see some parts here, it's dry. And I'm going to extend the lines out a little bit. And darken here a little more. I'm adding a bit of brown to give some variation in the colors. Okay. Let's soften this part a little bit. And let's leave this to dry and add some details to the boat. Now I'm going to switch over to a size 6 small brush, and then with a little bit of light brown, let's draw in some details. Okay, and we're done with this layer. Let's dry it. And I'm going to add another shadow here to show the reflection of this line. So I'm going in with just neutral tint. Just like that. And now let's remove the masking tape, the masking fluid. So you can see that we have very harsh lines from the masking fluid, and what I'm going to do here is grabbing my smallest brush, I'm going to wash it clean and dry it. And then we are trying to soften these harsh lines here to make it more blurry. And then keep repeating, wash and dry. And then blur off the edges here. And for the sun, I'm going to blur it all the way, all around the circle. So now you can see that the harsh line is gone. And you get this very nice contrast of the white parts of the paper. And I'm just going to fix a little bit more here and there to give it more details and contrast. Let's darken this area here, and I'm going to add some lines. Alright, and the next step is optional, but feel free to follow along. I feel like there's not enough contrast in the whole painting, and I would like to darken certain areas. And then using my Hake brush, I'll just gently wet the entire paper. Very gently, just make sure not to disturb the bottom layer of the paints. So I want to darken these bushes here and some of the ripples, so make sure that these areas are thoroughly wet. And then I'm using size 6 brush and just applying paints a little bit here in the center. bring out the colors more. So if you feel like there's areas you like to add, or you'd like to add more ripples, you may do so now. Make some final changes, and then I'm done with the sea. And then let's darken the brown trees a little more. I'm grabbing some burnt umber with a little bit of sepia. And just add darker colors to the bottom area. By doing so, it will help to ground the whole piece together, to make it feel more grounded. Okay, and we are done. And this is our final piece. So I hope you enjoy watching me paint. And next is your turn. Do give it a try. Remember that practice makes perfect. If you don't get it right the first time, don't fret, just try again until you get it right. And all the best, good luck, and I'll see you next week. Bye!